Ms. Walters, on behalf of the state. I was emailed by Ms. Ramsey a second motion to disqualify trial judge this morning. And before I do anything else, I need to address that. And I am find that the motion to disqualify, style as the second motion to disqualify trial judge, is legally insufficient, and therefore it is being denied. I have conformed copies for counsel deputies. If you could provide one to Ms. Ramsey and one to Mr. Porcello.
Judge, I would request a stay to seek a writ in the fourth PCA.
Thank you. That is respectfully denied.
And I would request a brief adjournment so that appellate court counsel can seek a stay in the fourth PCA.
That request is denied. All right. I have reviewed the following prior to this sentencing hearing. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation report prepared by the Department of Corrections, Mr. Scandirito. The defendant filed a sentencing memorandum, and I've had a chance to review that. The state of Florida filed a sentencing memorandum with exhibits, and I have had a chance to review that. Of course, I should mention that the defendant's memorandum included exhibits as well, and I read those. And the state's exhibits consisted of letters from friends and family members of Skip Scandirito, as well as documents from the police department. I think it was the Boca Raton Police Department, is that right to say? Yes. Boca Raton Police Department related to their cost of investigation. So I've had a chance to read all that. I'm just going to approach the sentencing like I would any other sentencing, and that is I will turn to Mr. Scandirito and counsel to see if you have any witnesses that you wish to call, other than the defendant and yourself in allocution. Ms. Ramsey, Mr. Arpazow.
The defense going to call Alfred Miller.
All right. Actually, what I should do, I need to do this properly. You file a motion for downward. It was actually contained in your sentencing memorandum, a motion for downward departure. So I want to hold an evidentiary portion of the sentencing hearing first, and then I'll go to, I guess, allocution and other aspects of sentencing, depending on the ruling by the court on the motion for downward departure. So if that's your burden, do you have witnesses that you would like to call and support the motion for downward departure? Okay. All right. So your motion for downward departure then is based upon the facts that came out in the course of Mr. Scandirito's trial. Would that be a fair assessment?
Correct.
Okay. And you primarily rely on two grounds. The first ground being that the incident for which he is to be sentenced was isolated, unsophisticated, and he has shown remorse. Correct?
Correct.
And the other ground, I need a little bit of further argument on just to understand it completely. That is an individual who scores 60 points or less and that has a drug addiction can be sentenced to a period of drug offender probation. Is that right, Ms. Ramsey?
That is correct.
Could you please help me out and understand that departure ground a little bit more and tell me?
It's not a departure ground, it's a statutory ground.
Okay.
There is a specific statute that permits that based upon the sentencing guidelines.
Okay, and so what needs to be established for that to be?
The score sheet.
Which is, matter of fact, I should ask you guys, I assume that I didn't get one from the government at all. It wasn't attached to the sentencing memo. But you guys seem to be focusing on the same numbers, so I'm sure it's pretty cut and dry exactly what the score sheet calls for. I'm sorry?
56.
And is that accurate what the state's handed to you?
That's what they provided me.
And is it accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so let me have that if you could, and then I can have that for me. So that statutory basis is based on the fact that there's less than 60 points, which there are, and what are the other two statutory prerequisites that are for free? I don't remember what they were.
He has a history of substance abuse,
All right,
and there is a facility that is amenable to providing him treatment and rehabilitation, and that is Fern House. And we in fact have a letter from Fern House accepting him, and we have Al Johnson here to talk about that program.
did you want to put that on at some point during the sentencing hearing?
Yes.
Okay. So, amenable to services, drug court, and he's otherwise qualified to participate in the program. And it's got to be a nonviolent felony. I bet there's no cases to describe this felony as violent or nonviolent, are there?
Your Honor, there's a statutory definition, and it includes forcible felonies, only PRR qualified.
Oh, okay, so by virtue of it not being within that enumerated group, it's by definition nonviolent?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, all right. I assume you agree with that, right, Ms. Ramsey?
Yes.
Okay. All right, do you want to wait to argue the motion for downward departure until after you've presented those individuals from either the Fern House or?
We have the letter from the Fern House judge, which has already been provided to the state, and Mr. Miller is here to talk about that program.
Okay, all right, so we're kind of back where we just started, that is that Mr. Armazal wanted to call Mr. Miller to testify. All right, let's go ahead and do that. All right, thank you.
Defense calls Mr. Alfred Miller. You want to make this
Well, I don't know how long it's gonna be. You know, the over-under is like 5 to 10 minutes that they stand, and then that, longer than that, you know, if we were a psychologist, I would say, you know, put them up in the chair. All right, Mr. Miller, good afternoon. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, and Mr. Miller, you and I come to know each other over my 10 years on the bench, and if you could just reintroduce yourself to me and spell your last name for our court.
Yes, I'm Alfred Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.
Thank you. All right, and Mr. Armazal, you may proceed by direct examination.
Mr. Miller, where do you work?
The Public Defender's Office, Palm Beach County, for the last 13 and a half years.
What is your title in
I'm the team leader of the social services program, where we provide services to our clients and assist them in various ways, from housing to substance abuse to mental health and a variety of other services.
Is one of the programs that you assist clients with named the Fern House?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you please tell the court what the Fern House does or what they're responsible for and how it's treating clients?
The Fern House is a rehabilitation facility where the clients can receive services for drug addiction and alcohol dependence. They can remain there for a period of 6 to sometimes 18 months, or if necessary by the courts. The Fern House is a very structured program with very good reputation within the community. They take a lot of the clients that are court ordered. They operate on group therapies. They evaluations, substance abuse evaluations, which is how Mr. Scandirito was shown to be accepted by the program. They're required to become employed and any assistance that they need within the community. Like if we need to develop a plan for a lot, they also need to do some mental health. We could factor that in and develop a plan for them, in addition to the clients are allowed to take other medications there as well. It's a very supportive program. Like I said, for a long history of just helping guys who are down and out to get back in their feet. They have a lot of successes with them.
Is the front house a residential program?
Yes, it is.
Does that mean that people that are in the program, they have to stay on site?
Yes, that's right.
Do they primarily treat people that have problems with addiction when it comes to drugs and alcohol?
Yes.
And did you help at all in front house evaluation of Mr. James Scandirito?
Yes, I did the facilitation in terms of reaching out to Chuck Orr, who is the director there, and they had known that we like to have Scandirito evaluated. And the letter that you see there is a result of the evaluation that was done.
And so did you receive the letter from Mr. Portal after he evaluated Mr. Scandirito?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and is this the letter? At this time, that's like move into evidence of front house.
Mr. Barfield, any objection to the defense exhibit 1, the letter from the first house?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that'll be received without objection as the first defense exhibit.
And now the front house, do they also have programs in which they can provide GPS monitoring and monitoring systems for the people that they treat?
It is pretty routine. They can provide those monitoring in one or two ways. They obviously do it as a condition of the trial. In the in-house arrest program, they have capability. I think they have 4 or 5 beds. In addition to a significant portion of the person that are placed on probation can also have the control devices.
So would the front house be compliant with any court orders if it came to restrictions?
100%.
So if the court was to order some type of, house arrest or some kind of confinement within the front house program, they can provide that service?
Yes, I have no doubt. I have no question.
Thank you, Mr. Barfield. Let me turn to the state. Any process by Mr. Miller?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming forward, Mr. Miller. Good seeing you again.
Yes, sir.
Take care. All right, any other witnesses that you wish to offer?
No.
All right, thank you. State, any witnesses that you wish to offer?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Ms. Ellen Scandirito.
All right. Ma'am, come on up here to the podium if you would. Hi. Raise your right hand if you would, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, and your name is?
Ellen Scandirito,
And if you could spell your last name again for me, please.
Scandirito.
Thank you. All right, ma'am, you may proceed. Do you want to ask questions?
Ms. Scandirito, did you prepare a statement that you want to read to the court today?
I did.
The chief and commissioner read it?
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor, for providing space for voices of families to be considered. James Skip Scandirito Sr. was my uncle. On April the 1st, 2018, our family received a phone call from the U.S. Coast Guard here in Florida. They informed us that Uncle Skip was missing and that underwater search efforts were in effect along the waterways. We were told that he went out kayaking and that no one had heard from him since. Naturally, our entire family was very worried. My first thought was that perhaps he might have drowned. It was really painful to imagine him fighting to swim at sea and waging war with the waves and the water. This was just the first of many panicked and anxious thoughts which very quickly started spinning out of control. And I thought about my uncle constantly from that day onward. Where was he? Was he hurt? Was he alive? Unfortunately, this wasn't the first distressing phone call that this family has received about a missing person. Back in 1999, the Scandirito family received a phone call.
Judge, I could object to this. It is not relevant to this prosecution or this sentencing.
you've suffered other losses in your family, ma'am? Is that what you were going to tell me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to sustain the objection about the details of any other loss because it really doesn't relate directly to Mr. Scandirito, which my job is to sentence today. So let's focus on him and whatever else you'd like to say.
Can I talk about my uncle and what he did for me at that time? Or?
Your uncle?
Yes, my uncle.
The deceased?
Yes, my uncle.
Yes, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so.
I just didn't want you to start going into details about other tragedies you've had in your family.
Sure, I understand. Okay. So I lost my father, and I won't get into the information surrounding that, but my Uncle Skip was there when this was his brother, and my Uncle Skip was there when they confirmed that my father's body was found. Uncle Skip was the person who identified his brother's body. And my Aunt Terry, his wife, was the person who told me that my father was gone and never coming home again. Your Honor, Jimmy Scandirito obviously knows about all these things. He was there. He flew home to Michigan, and he was with our family during this time. But during the course of the trial, he had his defense team assassinate my character. This is the kind of personality that we're dealing with. He knows how much our family loved his father and why we'd be involved in the search for truth regarding what happened to him. He knows that his father played a significant part in the quest towards justice for his own brother and my father. Throughout this entire ordeal, I've been absolutely compelled in returning the favor back to my uncle, as it was my Uncle Skip who was right there during the criminal process for my dad. He used his deep legal background to aid us in a complicated time. We thought that that was the most heinous, gruesome thing that we would ever go through, but we were really wrong. Back to 2018, when we got the call with the Coast Guard, our family started calling and texting his phone and sending him Facebook messages in hopes that we would hear from him. But we didn't receive any response. A million other would have friends in my mind. Was he ill? Or even worse, did someone hurt him? These deeply troubling and erratic thoughts, this perpetual state of the nervous system remaining on high alert in order to protect itself against further harm, are all expressions of unspoken language that this family knows very well. And that's the language of trauma. I already had PTSD prior to April the 1st, 2018. And my mental state was more regulated before then. But after April 2018, there was a relapse. Our entire family went back into a state of trauma, re-traumatization. Recovering from post-traumatic stress disorder is not linear. Re-traumatization happens when sufferers are exposed to controlled incidents, environments, or situations. And in this case, we have a lot of new, horrible, inexplicable traumas on top of what we already had. I, along with several other family members, suffered from sleepless nights and nightmares, visions of hand saws, Uncle Skip's body being mercilessly cut apart, body parts falling in his bags, blood. A lot of blood. Many of us look over our shoulder when we walk alone at night. carrying around the fear of personally being attacked or confronted with a knife or other sharp instrument. On April the 3rd, 2018, I received a call from Jimmy Scandirito. After reaching out to him to extend my support and my concern for his father's well-being and whereabouts, he told me that his father went out kayaking with a mystery woman, and he hadn't heard from him in days. He said he was spending his time and efforts posting flyers along the intercoastal waterways and by working closely with police. It's extremely difficult to summarize and convey the magnitude and complexity that Jimmy's crimes have left on this family. We've heard so much about Jimmy throughout the course of the trial, but we didn't learn very much about James Skip Scandirito Sr., the person whose last possible remainder of dignity was literally shredded away at the hands of his own flesh and blood. Skip's most important roles in his life were as a husband to Terry and a father to Jimmy. Skip and Terry were a powerful unit, loving, generous, and each gifted in their own ways. And the year prior to Skip's death, he was in a period of mourning, of heartbreak. He was navigating a new life of a widower while holding on to the legacy he and Terry created. And a significant part of this legacy was his son, Jimmy, who, bewilderingly enough, is sitting here in the courtroom today on the brink of a penalty for decapitating his father. Everything that Skip did in his life was for his son. When my Aunt Terry passed away, Uncle Skip told me he was most worried about how the loss of his wife would affect his son. He didn't talk about his own grief. He was most concerned about his son. I also remember when I talked to him during Hurricane Irma, I was concerned for his safety and offered him to come and stay with me until the storm passed. He told me that he would only evacuate the area if Jimmy did, and he wouldn't leave without him. This is a true sign of devotion. It's a testament of a father who adored his son and valued his son's life for his own. If only that loyalty was reciprocated. Your Honor, our family sat in the courtroom and we watched Jimmy exhibit zero emotion throughout the entire trial. He didn't shed a single tear for his father, who he supposedly had a great relationship with. He showed no remorse. Instead, he came in bolstering with confidence, smiling, smirking, joking, laughing with his attorneys. How convenient for Jimmy Scandirito that his father's head was never found. Isn't that ironic, how it worked out in his favor? He has been, by default, rewarded. He's been rewarded for destroying and hiding evidence in the form of a human body. The body of the man who gave him life. For dealing with someone who has no regard for human life. He had no respect for his father nor anyone else. He doesn't feel. He doesn't respect us, the remaining members of his family, who are the very people who have been here since the beginning to clean up the mess that he made. And I should add, Your Honor, that Jimmy Scandirito hasn't made any attempts to reach out to any of us to apologize for everything he's put us through, all the lies he's told, and most importantly, the horrific act of what he unapologetically did to his father. Let me tell you about some of the mess that he's made for our family, Your Honor. Our family was the ones to pick up the 2 vehicles from police custody. And this wasn't just like driving any old car. These cars were known to transport parts of Uncle Skip's dismembered body. They were completely torn apart as a result of the investigation. The floors were stained with blood, and they smelled in a way I've never smelled before. I'll never forget the smell as long as I live. This is a completely traumatizing experience. It was the Scandirito family that was there to handle all matters related to Skip's and Rita's home. We literally did all of the following and so much more. Taking off red evidence tape on doors, erasing police numbers on floors, dealing with rat infestations, exterminators, treating mold, organizing the movement of a bathtub, organizing a bathroom to be put together after the police tore it apart, putting up storm shutters, taking them down, saving the house from foreclosure, cleaning out the entire house. And the absolute saddest task of all was going through Uncle Skip's personal items, his clothing, his music collection, his books. Thinking about him all the while, knowing that what happened in that house, and having to be in that house, despite what happened, when the person that should have been there to clean out the house wasn't, because of what he did. We received all the phone calls on behalf of the situation from police and lawyers and neighbors and friends who very quickly united with us. We're an army of people banded together on behalf of Skip Scandirito, because once again, the person who should have been there was not. Reliving everything day after day for the past 15 months. Every time we receive a phone call is absolutely traumatizing. We were there to bury both his father and his mother. We laid Uncle Skip to rest beside his wife so they could be together again. Clearly, Jimmy didn't think of providing his father with a decent burial. So we had to do the right thing for Skip and for Terry. And this wasn't like a normal post-death planning situation. After months of communicating back and forth with the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office, they finally released Skip Scandirito's torso, severed torso, and the rest of his body could not be laid to rest. This whole process, yet again, was completely traumatizing. It was the Scandirito family who had a beautiful memorial for his father. Over 200 people attended to celebrate and to honor him, since the person who was supposed to honor him did everything but that. Everyone who attended the memorial was there and honored his memory, and it was clear based on everyone we interacted with in those days that we all shared one thing in common, a deep love for Skip Scandirito. It was comforting to feel so much love for him. We were amazed by all the lives he individually affected and the many stories that were shared with the common theme that Uncle Skip demonstrated generosity, love, and meaning in his relationships. These are things we've known and experienced with Uncle Skip within our family, and some of the many reasons why he is truly missed. We prepared a slideshow for the memorial to capture all the wonderful memories, and the one person's photo who purposely did not make it into the slideshow was Jimmy. We made sure not to mention Jimmy's name either during the eulogy. He was not worthy of being a part of his father's memorial because his actions certainly warrant a determination. It was our family that has spent tens of thousands of dollars to ensure that we're doing right by Uncle Skip, by paying his bills and paying miscellaneous expenses related to his house, to make sure we gave him a proper funeral and burial, and the many expenses of traveling back and forth from Michigan and from Indiana. We've traveled down here 5 times throughout this process. One family member did this with stage 4 cancer, and another family member was fired from a job for taking so much time off work. And all family members have been here on behalf of Skip Scandirito while battling the mental health challenges that this man has caused. You heard him yourself, Your Honor, when he testified. He said the first thing he thought of when he supposedly saw his father lying on the ground was his own self. his own future. And that about sums it up. This man is deeply in love with himself. You're going to hear a massive moving of the goalposts on the other side. The defense will now try to paint Jimmy with an upstanding character. Suddenly, he's no longer a drug dealer, nor the guy who cut up his dad. Now he's a man who's seeking drug and alcohol rehabilitation. I assure you, Judge, the only thing he's truly seeking is to travel the world and to get on with his life. Let's get real. Skip Scandirito's head, arms, and legs are still missing. Jimmy waited until he testified to say anything about the supposed location of these body parts. He did not cooperate with police. What would these body parts reveal if they were recovered? I agree with you, Judge. In the trial, when you discussed during the JOA that Jimmy should not be rewarded for having hid his father's body parts. Jimmy Scandirito is a public safety issue, and the people of the great state of Florida will be extremely unfortunate the day he's released from prison with the legitimate fear of will he strike again, when and with whom he cannot be trusted. He's a danger to society. The world does not take sociopaths seriously enough. We look at their exhibition of bravado and charisma as evidence that they are able to have free reign in public spaces. But we neglect to acknowledge how dangerous these individuals are to our communities. The Scandirito and Scoble families respectfully are asking for your consideration, Judge, to sentence him to the maximum of 15 years. I think we can all agree that he's been treated leniently enough, and enough is truly enough in light of Father's Day this past Sunday. I'm positive Jimmy Scandirito didn't think of his dad. We certainly did. Our family did. And will every day for the rest of our lives. And we hope, at the very least, that today at this hearing, that a precedent can be set. It is never okay to treat any father with such ferocity and degradation. Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Ms. Scandirito. Did the state want to ask any questions? Let me turn to the defense. Did anybody want to ask Ms. Scandirito any questions? All right, thank you for coming to court.
Thank you.
All right. We turn back now to the state attorney. Do you have any other witnesses you wish to call?
The state alderman Sharon Cole. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Kathy Attorney.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Raise your right hand if you would for me. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Thank you, ma'am. And if you could please introduce yourself to me and spell your last name for our court.
Absolutely. My name is Kathleen Aterno, A-T-E-R-N-O. Since 2004, I resided at 362 Southwest 31st Avenue in Deerfield Beach, Florida. James Skip Scandirito was my first cousin. I specifically moved to this area to be near Skip and his wife Terry. I was exceptionally close to Skip and Terry, particularly since moving to Florida. I consider both of them as my closest family members. In fact, while Terry was alive, I talked to her almost daily for over 25 years and got even closer to Skip during Terry's illness and passing. The statement made by Jimmy that Skip had little connection to any other family member was erroneous. That could be easily verified. Terry and Skip were committed to Jimmy and made sure that he had the best quality of life, support, and connection with family and friends. During the trial, as well as in his motion for downward departure from sentencing, Jimmy made unbelievable allegations, painted an exaggerated or factually inaccurate picture to the jury and the court. Jimmy's always had a sense of entitlement, lived way beyond his financial means.
but yet had the unconditional support of his parents. This was most notable by the fact that during Skip and Terry's lifetime, they gave or loaned Jimmy tens of thousands of dollars and paid for his lack of accountability, recklessness, and respect. During my 14 years in Florida, there were many family dinners, particularly around holidays and special events at Skip and Terry's house. Jimmy would attend most of these events. These gatherings were not drug or alcohol-fueled parties, but it was clear from Jimmy's demeanor that he felt like this was forced, that it was a free meal and he had no obligation to do anything. Jimmy's statements about the relationship between his father and himself said there was little that could have changed the course for his moral and emotional development, considering his role model father. Placing blame for his inability to move past whatever his father's shortcomings is Jimmy's excuse and mantra. Jimmy has also failed to acknowledge and give credit to the incredible role model and support system he received from his mother,
I'm sorry.
who is loving and giving.
I'm sorry, what's your objection? Go ahead, voice it, please.
Judges far exceed the victim impact. Far exceed. It is supposed to be a victim impact statement of the
I understand, but she's also commenting on the testimony and demeanor of the defendant at the trial. So what do I can't really that.
I don't think this is that victim impact statements are intended for people to come in and dissect the testimony of the defendant. This attorney was not even present for.
Okay. I want to overrule the objection, but I want to tell the defense that I am, in my sentencing calculus in this case, I'm not taking into account the demeanor of the defendant, not taking into account what I've heard to be a lack of remorse, except as it may relate to a motion for downward departure. I'm not taking into account the fact that the defendant on occasions at family gatherings was always concerned with himself and not with anyone else. These are things that I'm not taking into account. But, you know, when you have family members come to court and have a chance to say something that they've been holding inside for a long time, this is the opportunity for them to say whatever they wish. They could turn around if they wanted to and look at the defendant and say, you cut my family member up into pieces and did whatever else, and may you know, whatever. Okay, that's what it's about. I let them do that, understanding this. I'm not taking it into account. This is a chance for them to have that sort of allocution. So I'm overruling your objection, and Ms. Attorney, you may continue with your statement.
I will start my remarks. I'm here today to speak to Jimmy's felony conviction of the abuse of a dead body. It is not just any dead body, but the intentionally mutilated his own father. Not just the mutilation, but burying some of body parts and then treating the rest of it as common household trash. Jimmy's request that the court sentence him to 24 months of drug offender probation or inpatient treatment is beyond despicable. He was not convicted of a drug offense or many of the other crimes he may have committed. Jimmy cannot blame his chronic substance abuse problem or bogus claim he was protecting his father, but a much deeper sickness that should not be rewarded by spending a few years in a substance abuse treatment facility. His actions have personally destroyed me the past 14 months. From this laborious legal process, going to the funeral home to pick up what was left of his father's ashes, making sure his father and mother's ashes were together in Michigan for a proper burial, organizing a respectful funeral service in Florida for his friends, and the countless trips to the house, and the true pain of seeing all the personal belongings of a lifetime and so many memories of someone I loved and who loved me unconditionally. Please, Your Honor, do not slap him on the wrist for the most reprehensible crime. He needs to go to prison to serve the maximum sentence permitted by law.
All right, thank you, Mr. Turner. Don't leave the after to see if Ms. Ramsey can. No, you don't. All right. All right, Mr. Carnfield.
Chairman, the State Health Detective Timothy Curtis.
All right.
Judge, I have an Well, I discussed this with Mr. Parnafiello before.
What's your
And he
objection?
did not respond. My objection is that the state's offer and request for $90,000 in fines has to be made well in advance with listed witnesses and provide non-hearsay testimony for each one of those bills that the state seeks to submit. And there is a recent case, Negron, out of the 3rd BCA, which speaks exactly of this.
All right, so the state is calling this detective to pursue, I mean, I don't know why they were calling, I assume you think that they're calling him to establish the cost of prosecution pursuant to Florida statute 938.27, is that right?
He's one of the 3 witnesses that stated following such.
Okay, so what's the time limit for the court to make that determination? If it were a restitution hearing, it's 60 days from the day of sentencing. Is that the same time limit that you would have with respect to cost of prosecution? I take it from Ms. Ramsey that she's objecting to the cost of prosecution, although I don't know statutorily if she can object to the fact that costs of prosecution are due and owing in some fashion. It's the amount. Is that right, Ms. Ramsey?
I do object because it has to be established with non-hearsay testimony as to each one of those charges. So Detective Curtis did not come in and give a summary and say that these are the costs of the
No, that's the amount. That goes beyond. How about the entitlement to cost of prosecution?
Yes, I do object. Because it has to be parsed out in terms of what costs are attributed to what he has been convicted of and what costs are attributed to what he has been acquitted of.
Well, they don't have any costs related to the charge of murder for which he was convicted.
Correct, but there has been no separation. They are seeking restitution for every dime.
So during the course of this case, when the first call is made by Mr. Scandirito, your client, to law enforcement at the urging of Mr. Help me with his last name.
Mr. Gooden.
Mr. Good, to call and report that Skip Scandirito was missing, then during the period of time, from the time that he was reported missing until the time that they apprehend the defendant, are you telling me that you believe that those costs are not recoverable by the state of Florida?
Not all of them. And I can't tell you what they are because the discovery has been deficient with regard to that request for costs. I don't know. I have some grainy photocopies attached to a motion, some of which are not readable. I cannot discern the names. I have not had time to match those names up with what tasks were done in the case. So there needs to be actual testimony from each one of those witnesses as to what they are seeking restitution for and what task they were tasked with.
And is there a case that discusses the procedure to be employed in assessing entitlement and the amount of costs of prosecution? You said Negron is the case?
Negron is a case that talks about calling one individual to speak to all of the officers' bills, reversed.
And that was a cost of prosecution?
Yes.
It's a cost of prosecution case where the court indicated that it has to be supported by competent, substantial evidence.
Right.
That agrees.
That assessment, yes.
It
Is
doesn't.
you're saying admissible, in your view?
Yeah, with an exception as a business record, I would say that it is. And that was one of the witnesses that Mr. President testified that these are records kept by the Overton Police Department. And we're very close to the business to document it over time.
Did you notice the defense that you intended to offer these records as business records with a certification?
No. That's why I have a person to testify to that at this point.
Okay. But you still seek to introduce them as business records. I'm not ruling against you that they're not.
Correct.
What I think that the defense is saying to you and to me here is, Judge, you've got time to make this decision. I think the statute says 60 days. Does Ms. Ram, do you agree with that as the time period that I have to make this decision? That she wants some further, first of all, business record certification attached to the exhibits. I mean, these are normal things that you would do on a business record certification.
Yes, sir, and I agree, and the records were not provided within 10 days of consent.
Okay. So what I can do is find out what I can do within 60 days of today's date, that we can have a full hearing on the costs of prosecution that should be attended, if any, to this investigation. Because you have told me that the Boca Raton Police Department is seeking reimbursement for their costs of investigation.
Yes.
Case. Okay. So I believe the statute's 938. What I would ask, okay, so here's what we're going to do now. He can speak, if he wishes, about a sentencing recommendation to the court, anything related to that. But here's what we're going to do with respect to the cost of prosecution. I'm going to ask that the state and the defense, within 10 days of today's date, submit a bench memo to the court. I think you kind of included a little bit in your sentencing memorandum about, the wherewithal of the defendant is, relevant pursuant to the statute. Cite any appropriate cases, and then what I can do is get with you guys and set a date within 60 days of today's date to hear this evidence. And that is the evidence that would relate to the cost of prosecution. I guess I should say, it's called cost of prosecution, but it's really the cost of investigation related to the prosecution of Mr. Scandirito, okay? And for crimes for which he was convicted. The problem, frankly, Ms. Ramsey, is they're all kind of bollocksed up at the same time. You know what I'm saying is that, as they were investigating, the investigation, frankly, that occurred for the first several days, as we all know, was to try to find Skip Scandirito and to locate a missing person. At some point in time, it bollocks off into an investigation of an alleged homicide. So I guess we can see what we can do in terms of dividing that up, if there is any division to be had on that. And through competent, admissible testimony, I'm not ruling whether hearsay is admissible or not. Certainly business records is an exception to the hearsay rule. Just give notice to the defense on that. So let me go ahead. What's today? June 21st. Let me get my JA here. I'm available August 16th. Is that within 60 days? I got a courtroom because I had a couple of sentencings. Can we get Violet to come in?
The 20th of August will be the 60th day.
Okay, so the 16th is good, right? Just so happens that that's a date that I've set aside to some other criminal matters I've got to let be come up. I'm going to the civil division. And my first encounter involved the civil division. I just want to give you guys the time. What do you think in terms of a block of time? I realize there's going to be some legal art there. I'll get your memos. That'll help me resolve that. August 16th, what's our time that we've already taken up for sentencing? 8:30 and 9:30, or what's the time that we've already used?
August 16th, I believe it's in the afternoon.
So I, what,
1:30 and 11
it's just 1:30. For how
in
long?
the afternoon. We have the entire afternoon. So we have 1:30 to 2:30.
Right, 7, 1:30 and
We have
2:30?
7, 1:30.
Okay, and how much time do I block up for the 2:30? Okay, so how much time do you think would be needed for the government's presentation for this?
I would estimate an hour. I do not, the state's position is that you do not have to call each individual witness. I will not call each individual witness. So I'm just saying I'm not planning.
I understand your argument. But you have the records that you intend to introduce.
Right, as well as the two detectives who would testify in personal knowledge regarding their pay and the hours.
Okay, I can just open up in the morning, we get the courtroom in the morning. If you needed 3 hours, we could start at 9 and finish at noon, or we could start at 3 o'clock and be done by 5. What do you think?
The morning is probably better.
Can we get the courtroom in the morning?
I need to check because usually they have docket, they have hearings in the morning.
Okay, well, let's just set it at 3 o'clock. All right, August 16th at 3 o'clock for the Office of Prosecution hearing. So let me turn back to you now that I've done that, and I agree with Ms. Ramsey that she needs to get the adequate notice on the business records. I really do would like a memo from both of you, a memorandum, bench memo, as to the law that applies to this, and never having done a cost of prosecution. I've never judged a cost of prosecution matter before. I appreciate your guidance. And 10 days for that, August 16th at 3 o'clock, we'll have that hearing. Now let me turn back to you. I'll leave Mr. Scandirito. Does he want to be present for that?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll leave Mr. Scandirito here, depending on whatever my sentence is, and we will have him here for purposes of that hearing. August 16th at 3 o'clock, and we'll block off the rest of the afternoon. All right, so let me turn back to you, Mr. Martiello. You have any other witnesses you wish to call?
No, Your Honor, as long as it's reserved for argument and other times, no other witnesses.
Reserved at the cost of prosecution. Right. All right, so don't leave the podium. This is your chance. I'd like to hear your argument, not only addressing the defendant's motion for downward departure, but also whatever additional sentencing allocution you have before I turn to Mr. Scandirito and Ms. Ramsey.
Your Honor, the state of Florida filed its sentencing memorandum, and in that sentencing memorandum, we set forth our position. The crime that happened to Scandirito and dismemberment of his body and the allowing it to rot while the defendant attempted to avoid responsibility for what he did is truly one of the most heinous cases I've been involved in. With regards to the motion for downward departure, the court well knows that downward departure is a two-step process. The state would argue first with regards to isolated, unsophisticated, and a crime for which he has shown true remorse, as articulated in the sentencing memorandum. The state's position is that this was not an unsophisticated incident. And with many discrete steps of case law cited by the state in its memorandum indicates that the fact there are multiple steps in a crime is a factor militating against an unsophisticated act. And solely for the purpose of the motion for downward departure, the state's position is family members have said this defendant has shown no remorse for what he did to his father. The only thing that he has shown is that he wants to avoid the responsibility for what he did that day. With regards to the motion for downward departure on the grounds of the drug abuse treatment, the state's position is that going through the two-step process, assuming the court accepts the defendant's word that he has a substance abuse issue, when the defendant on the stand admitted that he lies, and the court heard numerous lies that the defendant told, even assuming that the court finds all those factors exist, the state's position is that the heinous nature of this crime, the heinous nature of what happened to Scandirito, a departure is not an appropriate sentence, and the court should not depart. The state feels that the defendant has not carried his burden to show a departure for isolated or unsophisticated, and asks the court to deny it on those grounds. But even if the court found that the defendant has made his burden, again, the facts of this case do not warrant departure. Family members have said more than I could ever say about what the effect of what this defendant did. The defendant, rather than do the right thing, do what any person would do, decided to cut his father up, dismember him, throw his body parts in the trash, and bury his body on a golf course, rather than pick up the phone and call 911. It is truly an atrocious thing that he has done. It is an act that cries out for the maximum punishment, and that's what we're asking him to get, the maximum punishment, because he deserves every minute of those 15 years.
And Mr. Partafield, just before I have you sit down, you and Ms. Ramsey appear to agree on something, that is he's entitled to 439 days credit as of today. Is that right?
That's right.
All right. I mean, I saw that in Ramsey's memo, and I saw that in yours, so all right. All right, so let me turn to Mr. Scandirito and Ms. Ramsey. Mr. Scandirito, I will address you first. Good afternoon. I would understand, of course, if you chose not to do that, but you do have that right, and I want to give you that opportunity. Do you wish to say anything prior to me passing sentence in this case, sir?
I wanted to for a long time, but it advice to the council.
Okay, all right. Well, of course, I did hear your testimony at the trial, and so I will turn now to Ms. Ramsey on your behalf, and have you not only given me your allocution, but also your argument in favor of the motion for downward departure.
Well, Judge, one of the things that I think we've heard repeatedly from family members and also in the probation report is this issue of lack of remorse. And frankly, I think the court knows the issue of remorse is a perception by people who look onto it. I can personally say that in the time that I have represented Mr. Scandirito, I have sat with him many times while he wept over the death of his father. He has not openly stated things like that to family members or to the court because we have advised him not to. Now, regardless of the perceptions of his lack of remorse, certainly as I indicated in the sentencing memo, even if you believe that he does not have genuine remorse, it is not a basis to aggravate or elevate the sentence. And when I listen to the family members, Ms. Scandirito, as well as this attorney today, the one thing that really struck me is that they address the issue of the loss of Skip Scandirito. And I know that my client, Mr. Scandirito, feels a great loss of his father, and no one seeks to minimize that. But the jury has spoken and found him not guilty of that, and it is not a proper consideration to consider the death of Mr. Scandirito and the loss of Mr. Scandirito in the sentencing, because that is not the crime that he has been convicted of.
The loss, I think, that I would focus on with that is the loss of having a proper burial for the father because of the accident.
And no one can cure that, Judge. I mean, you simply cannot cure that. But I read the state's sentencing memo with some interest, especially the accusation that they didn't believe that Mr. Scandirito had a drug problem. But I also know that Mr. Carnifiello, being the thorough lawyer that he is, reviewed all of the phone records for Mr. Scandirito. He clearly has read the WhatsApp memos, the ones that were concluded by the court and the ones that came before. He clearly has reviewed the photographs that are in Mr. Scandirito's phone, and they do document a history of substance abuse. When Ms. Attorno stood up here a few moments ago, she did not deny that. She was simply upset that she felt that Skip Scandirito was being blamed for what she termed a chronic substance abuse problem. I think there is little that could really explain the actions of Mr. Scandirito, except for the substance abuse issues that he suffered from. I read the letters that were submitted by a number of family members with interest, where they repeatedly said that they felt like Mr. Scandirito's name, the father, had been sort of drugged through the mud with false allegations of his substance abuse. The court was aware of the testimony during the court. And there were many people that testified that Mr. Scandirito had used at least marijuana and alcohol throughout his lifetime. There was testimony about narcotics in his system at the time of his death that he did not have prescriptions for. Those are things that accompanied Jimmy Scandirito throughout his life. I disagree with Ellen Scandirito when she talks about the defense is going to stand up here and try to paint a different picture of Jimmy Scandirito. That was not what our sentencing memo intended to do. Mr. Scandirito has many faults, and the court saw those many faults. But I think he came by them honestly. and he has never had treatment for the issues that have plagued his life. He is a man that can be reasoned with, and he is a man that can learn. The criminal punishment code that we have in Florida was established in order to inform the court and to give the court guidance in sentencing. As repulsive as we may find this crime, the legislature made decisions about this. They set out a protocol for how to establish what the sentence should be. Now, certainly, the court doesn't have to sentence him to the 22 or 23 months that he scores. There is nothing that keeps the court from sentencing him to more time, but this is certainly not the worst case. Mr. Scandirito has never been subject to a conviction and punishment before this. Those are significant issues. When you look at the case of Jimmy Scandirito, I think that one of the things that the court has to take into consideration, and they do not prohibit, Your Honor, from imposing any sentencing issues, but he has had great losses himself. Within a year of this happening, he lost his mother. He also suffers great grief at the loss of his father. It is in litigation whether or not he will ever inherit anything from that estate. The state is seeking fees in the amount of $90,000 against him. He has an education for law, but with a felony conviction, he will certainly never practice law. He has a professional real estate license that will also be forfeited because of his conviction. He has obviously, we've seen through the letters and the testimony of his family, alienated a family who will never again embrace him. So he is really a lone man in this world. There are many punishments, perhaps not imposed exclusively by the judicial system, but many great losses that he has suffered. I do believe that the appropriate punishment in this case is to give him the opportunity to be rehabilitated. This is not a case that the family says he's going to get out and travel the world. It's not. It's not. It's unlikely that he will ever benefit from the estate of his father. He has nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know, I really implore the court to give him the opportunity to be rehabilitated.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ramsey. I just want to pull one thing here, and then okay, thanks. I want to say first that essentially for what the crime for which the defendant is to be sentenced today is a crime for which he has pled guilty. And when I say pled guilty, obviously there was not a change of plea conference, but counsel in opening, counsel in closing, the defendant through his course of his direct and cross-examination admitted freely and voluntarily committed this crime of use of a dead human body. What the defendant contested was that for the homicide of his father. And the jury has spoken that they found that the state of Florida failed to prove that crime beyond a reasonable doubt. Ms. Ramsey argues that they credited Mr. Scandirito's testimony. You never know what compels a jury's decision, but certainly we can all agree that the state failed to prove that the defendant committed a homicide beyond a reasonable doubt. And what we're here for is to punish the defendant for the crime for which he has confessed openly and fully, not only in the trial, but also counsel has authorized on his behalf, because I believe I colloquied the defendant after opening, that he was agreeing with that strategy of the defense. So, in looking at that, the defense has filed a motion for downward departure from the agreed-upon criminal punishment code score sheet for that crime, abuse of a dead human body. And they've articulated two bases for downward departure. The first is that the defendant committed this crime in an unsophisticated fashion for which he has shown remorse and is an isolated incident. Well, I guess I will start off by saying that in a life of this man who's 50 years old, this is an isolated incident. There's no question that this is isolated, that this is an event that he was never previously convicted of any crime, never charged with any other crime, and this is isolated from the court's point of view. So I need to look, you need all three elements. Was it unsophisticated? The answer from the court, based on the evidence that was adduced to trial, was the answer is really not unsophisticated. The defendant went about a sophisticated methodology to dispose of the human remains of his father, including multiple trips to places to buy items that were needed to clean and or secure the ability to dismember his father. That it was a plan that the defendant uncovered, and it was perpetrated over the course of more than a day. I mean, so this is not something that was unsophisticated at all. In fact, if you could describe it as anything, you would say it was sophisticated. The defendant intended that his father's body never be found. I mean, there's just no question that he never intended his father's body to be found. That, in fact, during the course of the dismemberment and thereafter, he went about a concerted effort to prevent people from finding his father, believing and having others believe that his father had gone on a canoe trip or a kayaking trip and he was never going to be found again. In fact, as I recall in the defendant's statement, he indicated to law enforcement, they asked him where they thought his father was, and he said at the bottom of the water. In other words, on a kayak trip, fell off the kayak and drowned into the bottom of the intercoastal. So Mr. Scandirito never intended on his father being found, went about steps to prevent that, and it was actually only through some inconsistencies in his statements, the demeanor of Mr. Scandirito, and other things that caused law enforcement through, I would describe it as sophisticated and expert means to follow him and uncover the location on the golf course where Mr. Scandirito had disposed of a portion of his father's body. So I find that, in fact, it was extremely sophisticated and it was not unsophisticated. I also find, and this is the only one time I will mention remorse, because it is necessary for me to do that with respect to that third element. And of course, as Ms. Ramsey has argued, and I disregard anything else about remorse, except as it relates to this mitigating factor, the court finds first that on the stand, the government argued that he wasn't remorseful. The defendant expressed remorse on the stand for what he had done, that he had made the wrong choice, that if he had to do it all over again, he certainly wouldn't have taken this course of action. But everything that led up to that point in time indicated a lack of remorse. Everything, from the beginning of the case, from the time that he called the police to report his father missing, to set up a complicated set of scenarios to impersonate his father in text messages, to falsely give police locations and leads, to plant a car in a location where they would credit his version that he was kayaking. These are all not only sophisticated means to cover up a crime, but they also indicate a complete lack of remorse. The defendant never expressed remorse in this case until he took the stand in the trial. Now, as Ms. Ramsey points out, after he was arrested, I wouldn't expect that the defendant would express remorse because he's represented by counsel, and of course he's not going to call up the government at that point in time and say that he was sorry. But I'm talking about the time from the investigation, the beginning of the investigation, through his apprehension, no remorse. In fact, it was the opposite of remorse. It was a sophisticated cover-up of the disposal of his father's remains. The probation officer, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to consider it expressed in her report, because I wasn't a party to that interview. She was not called as a witness, or yes, she was not called as a witness by anybody, but said something about him showing a lack of remorse during the pre-sentence investigation report. I read it only because I was given the PSI, but I'm not going to consider that. So I do find that the defendant does not qualify under that mitigating circumstance because the crime was committed in a sophisticated manner. And I find on totality, based on the defendant's conduct from the beginning of the case, when his father was reported missing, through his apprehension, the defendant did not have true remorse. So I'm denying that request. With respect to the drug downward departure or statutory basis for a separate sentence for probation and drug offender treatment. As Ms. Ramsey pointed out correctly, the state and the defendants introduced in this case photographs of the defendant. I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was marijuana that he had photographs of, that his family freely smoked marijuana amongst each other, and they knew about it. And Mr. Goodman also indicated that these elderly gentlemen were smoking marijuana together. So I think that while I could discuss the complicated relationship between father and son here in a moment, that they did drugs. I don't believe that I've heard enough evidence to satisfy me that Mr. Scandirito had an abusive drug addiction, that he in fact, he's never been arrested. He was able to get a JD. He was able to hold down a real estate license. He was successful and made a lot of money doing what he did. I'm not saying that these things are mutually exclusive, but people who generally speaking have strong long-term addictions to drugs can't do those sorts of things, can't hold down those kinds of jobs, can't make that kind of legitimate money that Mr. Scandirito did. So I don't find, based on the totality of the evidence that I heard during the course of the trial, that the defendant has a drug addiction. I also believe that basis for a downward departure has not been proven. And then I'm going to say this, ultimately, that with respect to these two bases, if the Court of Appeals disagrees with me, I wouldn't depart downward in this case in my discretion. This is not a case that merits probation, period. I would not downwardly depart. I would not give a sentence below the guidelines based on the facts of this case and the circumstances surrounding this case. So, in conclusion, with respect to the motion for downward departure, it is respectfully denied. Now, with respect to the sentence of the defendant, Ms. Ramsey points this court to rehabilitation. The legislature of this great state has told this court that sentencing is about punishment. And what is the punishment that should be meted out on an individual who decapitates their own father and puts his body in a place where it can never be found? And what is the appropriate punishment for that? I mean, you could ask a lot of members of our society, and I would think that severe punishment is something that universally would be stated for that type of conduct. You couple that with the obstruction of a law enforcement investigation into a missing person, the defendant concertedly and let it down, misleading law enforcement, misleading friends and family members as to the whereabouts of his father, and then attended through the website evidence that was introduced to go to a place where he could not be extradited or brought back to justice, disposed of his cell phone, obtained another cell phone, obtained a stolen tag to put on his car to prevent from being identified or followed, and was apprehended in Alachua County, which everyone knows is up in Gainesville, Florida, and that's where he was apprehended. So the defendant undertook a course of conduct that was meant and intended to obstruct an investigation of the location of his missing father. The defendant did that because he had decapitated and dismembered his family member, his father. And this is not a case in which I think that this is exactly why, one of the reasons why Ms. Ramsey was successful in defending the homicide. Because these two people, while their relationship was complicated, many people would look at that relationship and say, geez, I never had that kind of relationship with my father. We smoked pot together, we hung out, we chased women together. That's just something that is kind of different. But it was a good relationship. It was not a bad relationship. It was a relationship that had never been violent. There had never been threats between them. And I think that that was a strong piece of evidence for the defense in this case, and the argument that he didn't, kill his father. But nevertheless, if that relationship is truly a loving relationship, you don't dismember your father. It's something that is, I think Ramsey pointed out, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in a loving relationship between father and son, and between individuals who have never really had a problem with each other. So it makes it much more, I'll use the word despicable, that you would do that to your own father and dismember someone who you had a close relationship. Yes, the father had his own problems in life. There were many people who loved his father, including, and this is his only child. His only child. And it's really, really very sad that Mr. Scandirito would do this to his own father. So, in looking at the totality of the evidence in this case, I've reviewed the sentencing memorandums, I've heard from everyone. I believe that the punishment that is appropriate in this case is in fact 15 years in the Department of Corrections with credit for 439 days. I will also, pursuant to Florida Statute 775.083, subsection 1B, impose a fine of $10,000 plus whatever costs that are attended to this, and that is $10,668. And I reserve with respect to costs of prosecution, and that will be a hearing heard on August 16, 2019 at 3 o'clock, I think, did I not? 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where I will decide two things. A, does the Boca Raton Police Department, are they entitled to these sorts of costs? And B, if so, how much? And I would appreciate that I get these memos from everyone as I communicate. So, now Mr. Scandirito, I'm going to inform you, sir, as I must, pursuant to Florida law, that you have the absolute right to appeal the judgment and sentence of this court, including all matters that adhere to the judgment and sentence. You have 30 days to do that. Now, if you file a notice of appeal within 30 days, Ms. Ramsey or Ms. Argazal, I still have jurisdiction to do the restitution hearing, do I not? Or the cost of prosecution hearing?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I kind of need that answer in 10 days from now, if I would, please, from both parties. But I would believe I would, because it's within 60 days of the date that I propose sentence. If they file a notice of appeal within tomorrow, for example, I would ask that the government seek from the Court of Appeals a relinquishment to allow me to hold a hearing that I've scheduled for August 16th related to cost of prosecution. So, Mr. Scandirito, I've informed you of your appellate rights. I wish you the best of luck. I will see you here. I'm going to issue a separate order, and I'm going to direct the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office to hold Mr. Scandirito at the Palm Beach County Jail pending our August 16th hearing, and I will see him at that time for that hearing. Now, is there anything else to come before the court with respect to the matter of the state of Florida versus James Scandirito II? Mr. Anderson, say. Yes, the 10,600
It's
and
actually $11,168.
$11,168 reduced to a judgment. I'm going to order 2 DNA swabs, and we are finished with this sentencing hearing. Thank you. Didn't you guys, I thought you gave me a judgment on the day that the jury found him guilty of count 2. I did too. All right.